Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever watched someone who wronged you seem to walk away unscathed? Maybe they lied, betrayed, manipulated, or stole, and for a time it looked as if they got away with it. But deep down, you know something they don't. You know that reality itself doesn't tolerate deception forever. It doesn't allow injustice to stand indefinitely. And whether or not you see it happening, those who build their lives on dishonesty, manipulation, and betrayal are being destroyed. Slowly, silently, but inevitably. You see, when a person acts unjustly, they don't just harm others, they poison themselves. Every lie, every act of betrayal, every manipulation creates a fracture in their soul. At first, it might seem insignificant. They might even feel powerful. But over time, the weight of their own corruption starts to crush them. Think about it. A person who deceives others must constantly live in fear of exposure. A manipulator must always watch their back. A betrayer must always wonder if the people they hurt will return the favor. These are not lives of peace, security, or fulfillment. These are lives of paranoia, emptiness, and slow decay. And here's the key. You don't need to seek revenge. You don't need to lower yourself to their level. The truth is, you're not the one who needs to deliver justice. Reality does that for you. Time is merciless to those who live in opposition to truth. They will crumble under the weight of their own deceit, their own cowardice, and their own refusal to take responsibility. So, what should you do? Focus on your own path. When someone wrongs you, don't let it consume you. Instead, take that pain and turn it into something constructive. Build yourself into someone so strong, so competent, and so full of integrity that their actions become irrelevant. Their collapse is inevitable. Your rise is optional, but entirely within your control. The silent destruction of those who wronged you is not your concern. Your concern is becoming the person who no longer needs to worry about them at all. The weight of untruth. When a person chooses deception, manipulation, or betrayal, they are engaging in a dangerous game, not just with others, but with reality itself. It may appear, at first glance, that they have successfully gotten away with it. They may feel powerful, untouchable, even victorious. But what they fail to understand is that reality is not something you can outmaneuver indefinitely. Truth has a way of asserting itself, no matter how much effort is put into distorting it. Lies are not just spoken words. They are structural weaknesses within a person's psyche and within the fabric of their life. Imagine building a house with rotten wood. At first, it may look just as strong as any other. The walls stand upright, the roof shields against the rain, and from the outside, it seems like a functional dwelling. But inside, the rot spreads, the foundation weakens, and one day, often without warning, the entire structure collapses under its own weight. This is the fate of those who live dishonestly. A lie is never just a lie. It requires more deception to sustain itself. One falsehood leads to another, and another, until the person who lives by deceit is caught in their own web. They must constantly adjust their story, manipulate those around them, and maintain an exhausting level of vigilance. And all the while, they are at war with something far bigger than themselves, the objective reality that stands in contrast to their falsehoods. What many fail to understand is that every act of dishonesty weakens them as individuals. When you tell a lie, you not only deceive others, you also fracture your own perception of reality. You train yourself to live in a world that does not exist, one where your actions have no consequences, where you can manipulate without suffering for it. But the real world does not work that way. The longer you live in that illusion, the more detached you become from what is real, and the weaker you become as a person. Look at people who have built their lives on lies, manipulation, and betrayal. At first, they might seem successful. They might even rise to positions of influence. But if you watch closely, the signs of decay are always there. They struggle to maintain deep, meaningful relationships because trust is a foreign concept to them. They experience anxiety, paranoia, and restlessness because they know, consciously or not, that their world is built on shaky ground. Their victories are hollow because they know they did not earn them, honestly. A person who embraces falsehood lives in constant fear. Fear of being exposed, fear of retribution, fear of the truth catching up with them. And here's the painful irony: the very power they seek through manipulation is the power that ultimately destroys them. They are slaves to their own lies, prisoners in the false reality they have constructed, and sooner or later, the weight of their deception becomes too much to bear. The collapse is not always dramatic. Sometimes it comes in the form of a slow, agonizing deterioration, a loss of respect, of self-worth, of the ability to look in the mirror without shame. Sometimes it manifests as an empty, meaningless life, devoid of genuine connection or purpose. And this is the lesson: no one truly gets away with anything. It might take time, months, years, even decades. But the weight of untruth is unbearable in the long run. And when it finally crushes those who embraced it, it is not punishment, it is simply justice. Reality corrects what is false. Always. Self-destruction through dishonesty. When someone wrongs you, whether through betrayal, manipulation, or outright deceit, it's easy to believe that they have won, that they've taken something from you and walked away without consequence. But that's an illusion. What they've actually done is set themselves on a path of self-destruction, one they may not even recognize yet. Dishonesty is not just a moral failing, it's a structural flaw in the way a person interacts with reality. A liar does not simply lie to others, they lie to themselves. And once they accept falsehood as a way of life, they begin a process of internal decay that is far more damaging than any external punishment could ever be. Consider what happens when a person chooses deceit over truth. The first thing they lose is clarity. Reality is complex, unpredictable, and difficult to navigate even when you're honest. But when you introduce deception, you add another layer of confusion, not just for those around you, but for yourself. You must constantly track your own falsehoods, maintain consistency in your manipulation, and ensure that your web of lies does not unravel. This takes an immense amount of mental energy, leaving less room for genuine growth, learning, or self-improvement. A person who betrays others has, in a very real sense, betrayed themselves first. Why? Because in order to manipulate, deceive, or harm another person, they must silence their own conscience. And the conscience is not something that can be ignored without consequence. It is the part of us that keeps us grounded in truth, that provides a sense of right and wrong, and that helps us maintain a stable and meaningful existence. When a person continually suppresses their conscience, they become disconnected from themselves. Over time, this disconnection manifests in subtle but devastating ways. Their relationships become shallow and transactional because they can no longer engage with others authentically. Their ability to experience joy diminishes because they have conditioned themselves to see life as a game of manipulation rather than an opportunity for genuine connection. They become paranoid because deep down they know they are not trustworthy, and they assume others must be just as deceitful as they are. This is why those who build their lives on lies often end up miserable, even if they appear successful on the surface. They may accumulate wealth, status, or influence, but they do so in a way that robs them of true fulfillment. They lack deep friendships, meaningful love, and the inner peace that comes from knowing they have lived with integrity. And no amount of material success can compensate for that loss. There is another consequence that is even more terrifying. A person who lives dishonestly loses their ability to trust themselves. Every time they choose deceit over truth, they reinforce the idea that their words and actions are unreliable. Eventually, they can no longer distinguish between what is real and what is fabrication. They become trapped in their own illusions, unable to rely on their own judgment, unable to make decisions with confidence, and ultimately unable to function effectively in the world. This is the real cost of dishonesty. It's not just about whether they get caught. It's not about whether others punish them. It's about the slow, relentless destruction of their own mind, their own character, and their own ability to live a meaningful life. So when someone wrongs you, remember this: they have already lost. Even if their downfall is not immediate, it is inevitable. They have set in motion a process that will corrode them from the inside out, and the best thing you can do is not to seek revenge, but to watch, with the patience of time, as they unravel under the weight of their own deceit. The consequences of neglecting responsibility. There's a fundamental truth about life that many people refuse to acknowledge. Responsibility is not just an obligation. It is the foundation of meaning, competence, and resilience. Those who betray, manipulate, and deceive others do so largely because they have rejected responsibility. They seek shortcuts, easy wins, and ways to gain advantage without putting in the effort or facing the consequences of their actions. But in doing so, they sow the seeds of their own destruction. A person who wrongs others does so because they are unwilling to take responsibility for their own shortcomings. Rather than striving to improve themselves, they look for ways to exploit those around them. Rather than facing their own inadequacies, they project their failures onto others. This is the mindset of someone who is fundamentally weak, not in a physical sense, but in character. And character weakness, though it may not be immediately apparent, always leads to suffering. Consider what happens when someone avoids responsibility. At first, it feels like freedom. They believe they have outmaneuvered the system, that they have found a way to win without playing by the rules. But there is a price for this kind of thinking, and it is paid in ways they do not anticipate. First, they become incompetent. Responsibility forces you to grow, to adapt, to become better. If you avoid responsibility, you avoid growth. Over time, this leads to stagnation. A person who deceives others to get ahead never truly develops the skills they pretend to have. A person who manipulates instead of earning trust never truly builds lasting relationships. And a person who refuses to own their mistakes never learns from them. Eventually, their lack of competence catches up with them, and they find themselves unable to function in the very world they tried to exploit. Second, they become resentful. A life without responsibility is ultimately a life without purpose. When you do not take responsibility, you have no sense of ownership over your own existence. This leads to a feeling of emptiness, a gnawing dissatisfaction that turns into bitterness over time. The very people who once sought to take advantage of others often become the most envious and resentful, blaming the world for their own failures, instead of recognizing that they were the architects of their own downfall. Third, they become isolated. Trust is built through responsibility, through showing up when you say you will, through keeping your word, through being dependable. A person who deceives others destroys trust, and once trust is lost, it is nearly impossible to regain. Over time, they find themselves surrounded by people who either do not trust them or who are just as deceitful as they are. And when their inevitable downfall comes, they will find that no one is there to catch them. they become powerless. People think that avoiding responsibility gives them control over their lives, but the opposite is true. True power comes from discipline, competence, and the ability to navigate reality effectively. A person who has built their life on lies and manipulation will find themselves at the mercy of circumstances they cannot control. They will be unable to hold on to success because they never truly earned it. They will be unable to maintain relationships because they never built them on a foundation of trust, and they will be unable to find peace because their conscience, whether they acknowledge it or not, will never let them rest. This is the cost of neglecting responsibility. It is not immediate, but it is inevitable. The people who wrong you may seem to succeed in the short term, but time is relentless. Their avoidance of responsibility will catch up with them in ways they cannot predict, stripping them of competence, connection, and ultimately meaning. And so your response should not be vengeance. Your response should be to build yourself into someone so strong, so competent, and so resilient that their fate becomes irrelevant to you. While they crumble under the weight of their own avoidance, you will rise by embracing the very thing they rejected: responsibility. Time reveals all truths. The most dangerous illusion a dishonest person clings to is the belief that they have escaped consequence. When someone lies, manipulates, or betrays, they may feel an initial surge of triumph. They believe they have outmaneuvered reality, dodged accountability, and secured an advantage without paying a price. But what they fail to understand is that truth is not something that disappears just because it is ignored. It waits, it lingers beneath the surface, building pressure like water behind a dam, until one day, when they least expect it, it breaks through with devastating force. Time is merciless in its ability to reveal truth. It does not matter how skillfully someone deceives, how convincingly they spin a false narrative, or how long they appear to escape justice. The truth operates on its own schedule, and it is patient. It does not rush to expose a lie immediately. Instead, it allows the liar to weave an even more tangled web, to grow comfortable in their deceit, to build their world on an increasingly unstable foundation. And then, often when they feel safest, the collapse begins. Consider how this plays out in real life. How many times have you seen someone rise through dishonest means, only to see their downfall years later? A corrupt business person who builds their empire on fraud may enjoy years of luxury, but eventually their deception is uncovered and they lose everything. A manipulative person who destroys relationships for personal gain may believe they are untouchable, but over time they find themselves alone, surrounded only by those as untrustworthy as they are. A betrayer who steps on others to climb higher may reach the top, only to realize there is no one left to support them when they begin to fall. There's a reason why stories of downfall are so common. It's not random, it's not just bad luck. It's a fundamental law of reality. What is built on falsehood cannot stand indefinitely. Lies require constant maintenance. They require effort, energy, and vigilance. But the truth requires nothing. It simply exists, waiting to be recognized. And that's what makes it so powerful. Even if justice does not come in a dramatic public fashion, the liar still suffers. There is an internal cost to deception that cannot be avoided. A person who builds their life on lies must live in a constant state of tension, always fearing exposure, always wondering when their facade will crack. Even if no one catches them, they know the truth, and knowing the truth while living a lie is a form of psychological torment that erodes them from within. This is why revenge is unnecessary. You do not need to chase those who have wronged you. You do not need to spend your time plotting their downfall. Time itself is handling that for you. The longer they continue on their path, the more they accumulate the weight of their own deception and the heavier it becomes. At some point, they will either have to face it voluntarily through confession, change, and redemption, or they will be crushed beneath it when the truth inevitably emerges. So, what should you do? Focus on your own path. Let time do its work. Your energy is far better spent on building yourself into someone who no longer cares whether or not they receive justice in the way they expected. Because the reality is, those who have wronged you will face their reckoning, just not necessarily on your schedule. Trust that time reveals all truths, and when it does, you will no longer need to see their downfall, because by then, you will be too far ahead to look back. Focus on your own path. When you have been wronged, whether through betrayal, deceit, or injustice, it is natural to want to see the person who hurt you suffer. You may find yourself dwelling on thoughts of their downfall, waiting for the moment when karma finally catches up with them. But here's the hard truth. The more you focus on them, the more you allow them to control you. Obsession with revenge or justice keeps you trapped in the past. It ties your energy to someone who does not deserve it. Every moment you spend thinking about how they will suffer is a moment you are not spending building something better for yourself. This is not about letting them get away with what they did. It is about freeing yourself from the invisible chains that keep you anchored to their actions. The most powerful response to injustice is not revenge, it is transformation. When someone wrongs you, they expect you to stay broken, bitter, or angry. They expect their actions to define you. But if you take that pain and use it to fuel your own growth, you rob them of their power over you. Think about this. If you remain focused on the person who hurt you, who is really winning? They have already taken something from you. Your trust, your peace, maybe even your sense of security. If you continue to let them live in your mind, if you replay the events over and over, if you fantasize about their suffering, then they are still in control of your emotions, and that is exactly what they want. But if you take that pain and channel it into something constructive, if you focus on becoming stronger, wiser, and more resilient, then their actions become irrelevant. They may think they harmed you, but in reality, they give you an opportunity to rise above them. While they stagnate in their own dishonesty, you move forward. While they remain stuck in their patterns of betrayal and manipulation, you create something meaningful. And here is the truth. Their downfall is inevitable, but it is not your responsibility to ensure it happens. Reality takes care of those who live dishonestly. Time reveals their weaknesses. Their own choices catch up with them. But by the time that happens, you should be so focused on your own progress that their fate no longer concerns you. This is the ultimate victory. Not proving them wrong, not witnessing their suffering, but reaching a point where their actions no longer define you at all. So, the next time you find yourself fixating on someone who wronged you, ask yourself, am I spending my energy on them or on me? Am I waiting for karma to take its course? Or am I taking control of my own future? Do not let the weight of their actions hold you down. Do not let their betrayal keep you from building the life you deserve. Instead, focus on your own path. Because in the end, success is not watching them fall. Success is realizing you no longer care whether they do.